Or, yes.
And then how about the disbursement of the funds? Is it
The disbursement of the funds based on the policy from that day will need the signature of both of all three, the engineer, the installer, and the homeowner.
Are the checks made out directly to the installer?
Will be made directly out to the installer.
So we're sure we get what we're paying
Right.
for, so to speak.
Correct.
I think that's a good policy. Any other comments from the board? Do I hear a motion to approve
And
this
how
loan?
much was it again?
It was sorry. I got tongue twisted. It was in the ballpark of $34,000 to $36,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, my only sense here is that sort of the problem we went through last time seemed to help push the applicant to get things straightened out.
Absolutely.
At least I hope that's the case.
Absolutely. When we came back to the property to follow up on the housing complaint from before, it was night and day.
Terrific, and I like the idea of the check being made out to the person that's actually going to get the money.
Absolutely.
All right, do I hear a motion for approval or disapproval of this loan?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of a betterment loan for 24/15 Myakama Avenue, say aye.
aye?
Aye. Chairman votes aye. Loan is approved. Yeah. Okay, fertilizer discussion. Yes, I've been.
We missed one.
We missed one.
Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, yes, this is what I had a question about. Reaffirmation of a loan that we made on 2012 on September 27th.
Yes.
For 79 Nantucket Road.
Yes.
Why are we reaffirming?
We approved that loan back in 2012 for this property. The legal owner on record was actually the custodian, the mother of the two owners per se. The two owners, when the original owner had died, left the property to his two sons, who were below the age of 18 at the time. So the original loan was approved to care of the custodian.
Good deal.
The loan was never dispersed. She never asked for the money to get dispersed to do the upkeep. Well, now they're going to need the money to be dispersed, but the owners are now above the age of 18. So we would need to reaffirm the vote so that we can disperse the money appropriately.
And it would be dispersed to?
To the owners of record, yes.
And is this disbursing for something that was done a long time ago now? Or is it just
no.
going to do the improvements now?
Just now, yes.
And what, is this just a replacement?
Septic.
Or
Yes.
Septic
just
replacement.
Okay.
Mhm.
Just curious.
And how much is this again?
This one was. I have it. Do you have it there? Should be right on the top. Oh, it's not written on here. It was supposed to be right on the top. It's also in the 20s of I believe it was around 27
Okay.
or so.
Comments from the board?
It should be right here. I'll get it.
No objections. May I have a motion to reaffirm the loan that was originally made to 79 Nantucket Road?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor of reissuing the loan, say aye.
Aye.
Chairman votes aye. And I will sign that one. Why is this different? This is...
Because he's sneaking something by it. I'm glad you noticed.
Oh, this is the...
It's the new salary calculations. We're all getting raises.
You're all getting raises, and alternate design systems will be universal
For the whole island, exactly.
I thought you were going to say disbanded.
Maybe we should disband ourselves. Well, we're all going to have term limits coming soon, so
Eventually.
We'll all be recycled. Now, fertilizer discussion.
Yes, so recently there's been some discussion of fertilizer with the selectmen, and it was brought up that there were some loopholes in the current regulation.
Correct.
And it also brought up certain enforcement ideas that have elicited a response from the industry here on the island. So I felt it prudent to put it on the agenda so that we can have a discussion here about current enforcement, hear from the industry, and then if the board has consensus to open a hearing for the regulation for next year, next month, to close some of the loopholes that we did see.
Okay.
So there was many comments that people had made that I recommended that they come here today.
Yeah.
So the floor should be open.
If you want to comment, please stand up, identify yourself.
It's in my opinion.
Identify yourself.
We thank you for coming first.
Yeah.
Steve Gibson Landscaping.
Pardon, what was your name?
Steve Gibson.
Okay.
Thank you.
Steve Gibson Landscaping. There's been so much work and so much time put into this, and I think that there's a lot of tools in place. If the town has not done anything about it, that's not our fault. But speaking from a landscape contractor who's been here for 23 years, there are an unbelievable amount of people here on this island who know exactly what they're doing. So for Bob to stand up, that's why I'm here. You know, for Bob to stand up and tell us that we're a bunch of idiots and we don't know what we're doing, that stepped on my toes to the point where I wanted to crawl out of this. So there are a lot of really educated, smart people that do landscaping. So for the board,
Excuse me, just for a second. We've had a request to have the public comments be done at the microphone. They can't hear it. It's being on TV right now. So if you can stand at the microphone, please.
So just, again, thank you for coming. Just restate your name and...
Steve Gibson, Steve Gibson Landscaping. I am here today. Me and Michael have had many conversations about it's just when I watched Selectman DaCosta, with all due respect, basically say that there are, the gloves are off and that, we're going to ban this. There's a very special, intelligent landscape crews here. We've all been to schools. We know our interest is in this island. It's not as simple as he spoke. Our interests are in our businesses and the welfare of the island, and we all are certified. We're just I don't quite know what else to say, but
Right.
that just kind of.
Do you have any suggestions as how we could improve the regulations?
Well, I think that if the town's going to, you can't just say, we're going to ban granular fertilizer. That's not the way it is. I don't know how you police it it's not my job, but to stand in front of everyone at the Board of Selectmen meeting and say that we are all a bunch of basically idiots and we don't know what we're doing, that is why I'm here.
Okay. We're trying to find a way to move forward.
Right. I think that Michael is probably the best.
All right, then,
spoken.
Michael, why don't you speak? Just introduce yourself and...
Mike Mizzarelli, J&M Landscape Services. I was on the Article 68 Work Group Committee. One of the recommendations to the town when we wrapped up, going back on it, we completed our given task, and we all got nice letters from the town saying thank you, and we'll take it from here. But there was a recommendation to get together an advisory group of landscape members, community members at large, and that has not happened year to date. I don't know what the discussions have been, but that would be a helpful thing to the Board of Health because those people know the regulation, know the products, the products are getting better as time goes by. When the regulation first came into play, there wasn't much product out there, but it's getting better. So my recommendation would be get the advisory group together, and as questions come from the Board of Health, we can answer them and to the best of our ability and get it back to you to make a decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, so comments from the board, and then I have some questions.
Well, since I was at the meeting, first off, I've never fully understood why the committee was not set up, and I certainly have some responsibility, but I think the town's overall has a responsibility for not doing that, and it's come up before, and members of the landscape community have indicated their willingness to serve on such a committee. And if for whatever reason the town hasn't done that, I think we as a board
We'll do it.
would be very happy to do that. And we've got a great chairman and a great board, and I would appreciate all your support. And I think you can be helpful. And we have to figure out how to make that sort of function. Because committees, I've served on a lot of committees, as others here have, but there's a little bit of rigor that is helpful to make sure they are informative, that they actually meet, that we communicate between our board and you folks and the staff in a way that helps us get to where we want to get to. And so it's not just saying I'm willing to serve. It's going to take someone who is willing to be the chair of a committee. Someone has to help call the meetings. We're going to have to make sure Roberto's supervisor, he does have a supervisor, is willing to let him help the committee and sort of serve as a staff consultant, if you will, or advisor to the committee, because it takes a back and forth. So there's a lot to do. But I think it would be just excellent, Mr. Chairman, to proceed and work out who would serve on that group and get moving here.
I agree. Other comments from the board? Yes, please. Just again, use the microphone. Identify yourself.
Brian Daigle. I have a company, Native Grasses, on the island. My biggest concern from watching the video of the last meeting was, I guess, the mindset, the approach that Mr. DaCosta had going into the meeting. Roberto started his presentation showing a slide that 48% of the nitrogen input is actually there from natural sediment. Well, he stepped on that in the first 30 seconds and put Roberto right on his heels. And my concern is, being a professional in this industry for 27 years, that there isn't a lot of, I just feel like he's creating a lot of emotion and a lot of hatred for something that within that graph, and I even question how high that number is, but within that graph, the input of fertilizer to the total nitrogen input in the harbor is 3%. He's creating a lot of emotion because I don't know why. Maybe he doesn't understand what some of the other inputs are and feels like it's just a neglect thing on our part. But I think we need to be very careful certainly with public meetings of that type of emotion, about that kind of attacking or swaying or changing the numbers off the hip, shooting off the hip. That took place that night. And, I recommend to this board and to the Board of Selectmen that there be a little bit more of a professional approach, and that we don't create such emotion, such hatred, and propaganda towards something that, is well represented here today, and by many, many others on this island as a real professional industry with good intention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may again, I serve with 4 fellow members of the Board of Selectmen, and we all have our own style, and we come at things in different ways. I think in this case, Mr. DaCosta is coming from a point of view of sort of personal frustration, not so much with you guys as much with everybody, and so it just comes out in a certain way. I know he feels strongly about the harbor, and I think from his point of view and other members of the Board of Selectmen, not just Bobby, that we can only do what we can do. So there are certain elements of what goes into the harbor that the town or the Board of Health can manage, and there's some we can't. So we tend to focus on those we can, and that's just the way it is. I think we can all work better to communicate, and hopefully this is a start. It's a two-way street. Take some gumption to stand up and speak. You're on television with what you say, but a dialogue is important in any case. So I think Bobby's coming from a good place underneath. It just comes out with Bobby DaCosta's style sometimes. Okay.
I have another question, if I may.
Yeah.
My question is the project that the Army Corps of Engineers is going to start on the jetty work out in the harbor. Is there any information as to what that work, the influence that's going to have on increasing the flow in the harbor, both in and out, what that might do for the numbers of nitrogen? My understanding is that they've provided a model that essentially fixed or worked very efficiently towards fixing the problem, therefore increasing the flow. So whatever we are high in numbers, increasing the flow of water in the harbor might actually repair what we have in terms of long-term influence.
Right, I haven't seen those numbers, but that is correct, that flow would help significantly.
So the long-term solution is being
Right.
worked on.
Well, it's a long-term solution. I think, as my colleague said, everyone gets emotional about this at some level. We have people, when we've changed or made septic regulations stricter, have been upset with us about that, saying septic's only a small part. And people say fertilizer's a small part. And nitrogen from the atmosphere may be more, but the point is we have to attack all of it. All of it. And we have to do that in a rational way and based on scientific information. So it's fertilizer to a degree, it's septic to a degree, and it's the nitrogen we can't control to a degree. But what we can control, we will do our best to control the best we can with a general approach. Yes, Roberto.
And what I was trying to explain with that first slide, I was going to explain, use an analogy, really, was the easiest way to think about that. The nitrogen, the septic, and the runoff are the only three things in that slide that we can control. So what we would do is, the analogy that I was going to use was think of the harbor as a bathtub, and the bathtub being halfway filled, the water being the nitrogen. You turn on the faucet at 5 gallons per minute. You drain the tub at 4 gallons a minute. If you stop the running of nitrogen going in, if we can bring that down to an equal in and out or just below, slowly through entropic activity over the course of the next 5 years or so, the nitrogen will start leaching out of the sediments and the harbor will be getting back to where it was supposed to be. So like Dr. McNabb was saying just now, is we're trying to control or regulate what we can. Most of the nitrogen that's in the harbor we cannot control.
So moving forward, one more question, then we'll move forward. Go ahead.
Have you ever?
Maybe you'd better use the microphone so people can hear you.
Have you ever stood at the town pier when it hasn't rained in 6, 7, 8 weeks during the summer and watched what comes out of that outlet? It is frightening. I mean, it is like the Exxon Valdez.
You mean
All that stuff coming from top of Orange Street, Union Street, Washington Street, just there it goes into the harbor. So I don't know exactly what my point. There's so many factors involved in what we're talking about. But I just wanted to bring that to a point.
Thank you.
But, yeah, I think that's sort of what we're all saying, though.
It's
You know,
stormwater runoff, which is
Part
part,
of the
it's part of the picture, and the town is starting to work on what we're going to do with that, and how we're going to control that. I mean, right now, yes, anything that's caught on the roads everywhere in town the pipes lead out to the harbor, but it is being addressed.
yeah, I mean, we put in some new catch basins, but not enough, and we're spending, just for example, the number is something like $3 million to work on runoff that comes through the Consu Springs area, just to get, and that drains a big, huge area. So we are addressing it. The overall budget number, I remember, for doing all the storm drains going into the harbor this was a few years ago, something like $26 million. And we're chipping away at it. But we totally agree that's one of the sources. But even though we have any one of these we're working on, it doesn't mean we don't work on the others as well, including fertilizer, and that's what we're trying to figure out.
Any other comments from the board? So, I think...
Could I just make one comment back to Brian's point about the jetties? I'd be happy to go back and try and find that. There are some reports we did receive. They ran models with various configurations, and raising the jetties was one of the models.
Right.
And, eventually you're trying to move a TMDL number from 45.2 to 39.9, whatever it is. And on the margin, each one of these things helps move it down.
Right.
I don't think any one of them, as I recall, would move it far enough by itself.
It didn't.
News, if you just do the jetties, that's
No,
fine.
no,
It moves at 2 decimal points.
It has to be everything.
So,
Yeah, and also all the drainage basins and stuff downtown have been tagged to let people know that it drains to the harbor as well. Just the basic education in that part, that it's not being captured and taken to the wastewater facility. They're tagging them saying this goes straight to our harbor as well, so that we can at least get that information out there.
so hopefully people don't dump paint into the sewers.
Exactly.
Just to pick it.
And that they don't drain pools. That's
We'd
a
all
big
be
one.
surprised. I mean, I think your comment about what comes out is a pertinent comment.
Can I just ask one more brief question?
Please.
In terms of the advisory board or the possibility of it, how does one look out for that? Is that a Board of Health appointment, do you think, or is that a Board of Selectmen appointment? And so what sort of timeline might that take
Well,
to
I'm
come
just
together?
thinking to myself here, in your comments, any regulations changes would have to come to this board. So I would think that that committee would certainly have to give input to this board. So I'm just, Roberto, if we can think about the logistics of this, is to form that committee
Mhm.
and have them, I don't know if we need I'd like that committee's input before we do a public hearing on changing.
Sounds good.
And changing the regulations. So we will form a committee.
Yeah. And
They're
Mr.
working
Chairman,
to it.
I'll report back to the board at their next meeting that we've discussed this and make sure they understand that we would like to receive the advice from a group of landscapers as a committee.
Right.
And so the Board of Selectmen will be alert to where we intend to go. And if they have an issue or a concern, then they can express it. But my sense is they would be pleased that we're proceeding in a positive way to work out our way
Right.
through this. So.
I don't think we need to redo the whole working group. We just need to have someone besides this board who are involved in the business look at those regulations again at some point, and then we'll have our public hearing.
Exactly.
Just one thing, there is a concern about time here,
Yes.
so that I don't think we want to start on a process that takes us through we don't get to the regulations proposals until September. I think we want to get to the regulation proposals
In May.
this season. I know you're probably going to start before that happens, but you all know how to do this anyway, but not everybody does. And if there are things we can do to the regulations that Roberto refers to them loopholes, whatever they are, they may not be onerous, and you ought to know what our proposals are right now. So some of them, may be easy and not something you'd have a problem with, but we got to find that out quickly. Okay.
So I think our timeline for any change or amending of the regulations would be April or May.
Isn't the application fertilizer start April 15th? Is it April 15th?
April 15th.
Yeah.
In full fairness, you've got people who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, on fertilizer. Our programs are already set for 2016. So,
Yes, please. Which means we'd almost have, we don't have any time.
So here's my thought, is that the regulations under enforceable, that have been enforceable, have been in place for 2 years.
Yes.
I think the goal right now from having a committee is, not only to be able to come up with new regulations, but I think what there's been a lack of is not only enforcement, but maybe education. I mean, when this first came out 2 years ago, there was a big seminar down at the Nantucket Hotel, and that's been the only thing that's taken place since this law went into place. I think the effort needs to be towards, because I'll say this, from an agronomist standpoint, when you're managing cool season grasses, 3 pounds of N it's on the low end. I mean, it's really reducing things down to very, very lean amounts in terms of the course of the 6-7 month growing season that we have here. I think to ensure that everybody's on board and that you're not going to have as many violations is to focus on, the education, the renewal of licensing, maybe some kind of educational points towards relicensing, where if you're missing the seminars or you're not able to attend or watch online or whatever, your license isn't renewed. But then at least how many, everyone's on board and they're educated, they're up to speed as to what, how and why things are the way they are. We're 2 years into a pretty lean recommendation or law now. I think we should give it a chance to work and just make sure everybody's on board. Because, like Steve said, there's been a lot of time, and Rick even said, there's been a lot of time already put into this thing, and that's what's been set into place. I think it's a very good program, or a very good set of rules to follow, and doable, so that things don't suffer as far as an agronomic standpoint. But maybe that's the focus of the subcommittee is that kind of thing. And this, setting up the program, setting up the educational seminars.
So what is the educational plans for the year? Or
Do we have them set already? The seminar?
I think that, in fact, this had none. When we sat there for, what was it, 1 or 2 days, it's so repetitious for so much.
This is the licensing process?
Oh,
Just
it's
to know
unbelievable.
I just want to know what you're talking about.
For 30% of us, we've been to the same class,
Right. Understood.
listened to the same speaker 10 times, 12 times. We saw him at the farm. We saw him here. Then there's the other 30% who actually understand what the speakers are talking about, and they can kind of get it. And then there's about 40% of people in the room where it's going right over their head. They don't understand the language, whether they don't speak English or they have no idea what. You're talking about like botany,
okay.
So I don't mean to sound a little bit sarcastic, but it's just going.
So
Mark, great.
and that was actually part of the presentation with that.
Yes, please do.
My name is Mark Lucas. I'm the golf course manager at Nantucket Golf Club. I was one of the original members of the work group committee, the Article 68 work group. 2 years, as Brian said, we've done this. At the end of, when we finished our work group work, we finished with the product that was lauded nationwide as some of the strictest regulations in the country. Since then, we made recommendations at the conclusion of our work group to the Board of Selectmen. I don't think any of them have been enacted. None. So what's been done in 2 years? How's the program even been given a chance? None. I mean, we don't have an advisory committee. I've talked to individual Board of Selectmen. I've talked to people at the Department of Natural Resources about this. Everyone says we're going to form an advisory committee. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Nothing happens. I don't know why you want to change something you've never given a chance to even work.
Well, I'm saying we're not going to change anything. We're going to relook at the regulations. I don't think if there's loopholes or way we can make them better.
Can somebody tell me what those loopholes are? I've heard a lot about loopholes. Any?
I think the biggest thing was the enforcement part.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I took out of that January 6th meeting when I watched it. He was taken a little out of context, but after I watched the whole thing, it was more about the enforcement part.
And I don't mean to sound really defensive, but we spent a massive amount of time on that committee, and we had people from just a wide array of businesses, industry, conservation groups, people with PhDs. We all came together to put those regulations on paper, and they were enacted. And I'm just really disappointed in the last 2 years what's happened or what really hasn't happened. And I understand there are issues with enforcement, but education has to be part of it. Enforcement has to be part of it. An advisory committee would help you guys so much. It really would. It would help put together the educational programs. We have contacts that you don't in the educational field. I just think you need to maybe go back, revisit those recommendations that we put forth, and enact them.
Fine, thank you. Well, you're absolutely right. Those regulations, it's one of the best working groups or committees I've ever seen, which your product was superb, and you're right. Other communities have borrowed on, have used them as a template. I know I have sent them to colleagues in other cities, and they were quite thrilled with them because they said, we had a place to start, and they didn't change much of it. So what we're hearing is, I don't think we're hearing that we're going to make massive changes in your work. We're going to tweak them a little bit to make them better, all right? And that's what's important. And what we're hearing is we need better enforcement and better education.
Also, one important job of the advisory committee was always meant to tweak the regulations and the BMP, the best management practices. It was supposed to be a living document.
Right.
2 years, nothing's happened. Is there new science that may change the regulations? There might be. The advisory committee could help you with that.
Well, probably for those that have invested in certain materials and all, I don't see any great change that if we change the regulations in May or April, that's not going to affect it. We're talking about tweaking them to a degree. So we can continue this process, but we do want to look at the enforcement aspect before April, February. Do we have time in February?
Yes. So what we're really looking at right now is the loopholes that you're hearing about are things like the aspects on enforcement where we can't get onto properties, certain properties, to look at the spreader, for example. We can't get onto certain properties to look what product is being put down or how it's being put down. Those are little things like that we're going to have to work on. The other aspect on it is the education. We heard it loud and clear. Having everyone at this 1 day, 2 day long seminar learning geoscience is not the best way to spend people's time. And it's not billable hours. We understand that too. So what we're looking to do is that tier that system a little bit, where the people who, like you said, it's going way over their heads because they don't have to know that. What they need to know is how to spread and lay down that product. So what we're thinking, the general idea was maybe a skills test for something like that. And then the stronger information, the more important information, the changes in the science, the changes in things like that, in any regulation or anything like that, would be for the foreman or the supervisors of the group. So that's one of the ideas that's been in our heads and the idea. But
So how are you going to? I know, Jeff. I mean, who's going to enforce that? Like I read in the paper, and probably shouldn't be saying Jim Cook being, he was the only person that was fined. He could have been putting down Balaton. He could have been putting on a fungicide, something that could be spread in the rain. It's not. Who knows what's being spread, when it's being spread, how it's being spread? How is that going to be policed or?
So what we have now is we have a person in natural resources who will be able to.
Who's a horticulturist or agronomist?
I can't speak to that. It's not my
Yeah.
department. And then we're also bringing in Hank Ross earlier this year, and he will be trained in this sort of information through the same trainer, so that he can.
I don't want to be argumentative.
No, I completely understand. It's your lifestyle. It's your living. I completely understand that. He will be trained by the same. He will have to go to the same classes that you would go to, and we would train him in the same methodologies so that he knows what he's looking for as well. So
he's going to know how to calibrate a spreader. He's going to know how 3 pounds per thousand.
we're going to be doing
right.
we're going to be doing the same training.
As long as we're all on the same
Yeah,
playing field,
We're getting there.
it'll
Right.
work.
Yes,
And
the perfect example is in the previous town that I've worked in. Somebody has said it's having certain supervisors like having a plumber train a dentist. It's you need to know what it is that you're looking for.
All right, so why don't, getting education, getting the committee is going to take a while, and it should be done with due speed. If we want to increase the enforcement and the regulations, we'd really have to put that on the February agenda,
Yes.
so it would be done. We'd have a public hearing in February on whatever you propose, but the advisory committee, we have to get going in parallel.
So what we can do is we can recommend a general structure of an advisory committee: 3 members, 4 members, 5 members, and then I can open the hearing, start the public hearing process for next month for the enforcement aspect.
Right, but I would. You've got some potential input here on your advisory committee.
Absolutely.
And I would get together with a couple of these gentlemen and work out, particularly those that were on the working group,
And I'm hoping that some
what
of the
the
gentlemen here
vision
will
of the
be on the
advisory
advisory
committee
committee.
was, and get their input into it, how many it should be, and then if it's a committee, there's different rules about committees and there's different rules about working groups. So I would leave that to you and maybe Jeff to work out how you want to do it.
Absolutely.
And then you can come back to us in February and tell us how that's going. I mean, I see there are 3 things in February: a public hearing on the any regulation changes, an update on the status of the formation of the advisory committee, and an update on educational plans, with input hopefully from all that on the advisory committee. Yes.
I honestly don't think the advisory committee will take you that long to find volunteers. It was,
I think they're
it
right
was
here.
Well, actually, I think we actually
It was
have it.
nearly done about a year and 8 months ago. Essentially, the makeup was there. Jeff might have the emails, in fact. I know I wasn't going to be on. I needed to take a step back at that point after 2 years of pretty hard work. But I know there's another golf course manager that was really interested in being on that advisory committee. And I think Cormac Collier had an interest in being on that. And I think it's good. And maybe you need somebody public at large, but you need a wide, just not landscapers. You need a wide array of people on that. And maybe it's a 5-committee makeup, but I think that's what Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was going to be like 5.
Yeah.
You're going to have some professionals. You're going to have, somebody like a Peter Boyce, maybe somebody like that. But a good committee, I'm telling you, it won't take you long.
Right, well, I'll leave that to Jeff and Ricardo to set up, and I agree, more than 5 or 6 people, it would be, What's that?
Roberto, not Ricardo.
Did you say Ricardo? I didn't hear it.
I didn't hear it either. Well,
We're very selective in our hearing.
Well, I'm approaching 70, so it kind of goes. All right, fine. So that's the plan. Now we have to, for a public hearing, we actually have to vote that we're going to have a public hearing.
Yeah, we need consensus on that.
So I need a
Yes.
motion that we will have a public hearing on the February 17th meeting on the fertilizer regulations.
I make a motion.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor of a public hearing on the 17th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, so we have a plan. Public hearing and update on education, and you're going to have the committee formed by then.
Yes, sir.
And they can come and represent, someone from that committee can represent that committee at the public hearing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay?
Can I ask one question on the public hearing?
Yes.
So at the public hearing in February, would you be proposing changes at that point, or you, as a Board of Health, you could act to enact changes at a public hearing? How does a public hearing like
The
that
hearing
usually
would
play
be
out?
for suggested amendments to the regulations that exist. And I think Roberto will have those distributed ahead of time.
Yes.
So it's more like exploratory.
So any opening of the hearings for the regulations would be any suggestions, exploratory suggestions in the same way, as well as changes.
Roberto would have some recommended changes, and hopefully he would be talking to you beforehand and get your
Absolutely.
suggestions on it, either with the committee if it exists or individuals, and then we would just open for public comment at the hearing, and then we would vote on them. We would vote on them all, or subtract or add.
So for Michael and for Mark and everyone who was on BMP, I'm a little confused. So exploratory meaning we're going to stick it to BMP and tweak it, as you said, or
Well, I think at this.
I was not.
I think
on that.
I think at this time, given the time constraints, that what would be tweaked was the enforcement part of these regulations.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, I haven't heard from Roberto. Maybe he's going to clarify it now, but I don't sense there's any change in the intent of the regulations as it came out of the committee. And I think, Brian, you said, 3 pounds per million or whatever the hell it is. We're not here, and I don't think Roberto is trying to change any of the
Correct.
application techniques or the type of fertilizer being used or any of that. We're approaching more administratively how we can feel comfortable that the implementation of those best practices is even and consistent across all landscapers or homeowners. I mean, I'm my own landscaper.
Well, that's
I need help more than anybody else.
I think that's an issue.
You know?
Yeah, we have
So.
to work on too is education of the homeowners. And that's a bigger haul. But I think any substantial changes in the nature of the regulations would require input from the advisory committee before we would do anything like that. Because those are, I think, very fine regulations. But with everything, they need often adjustment. Yes.
There was, like I said, it's been a couple of years now, but to change the regulations themselves, the way the current regulations are written, it required I believe, a recommendation from the advisory committee.
Yeah.
But it would be backed by professionals in the industry, meaning scientific researchers. And then I believe it still had to be a supermajority, so 4 out of 5, let's say, if it was a committee of 5. But that's the way, I think that's the best way to approach it, because you go to UMass, you go to Cornell, You go to UConn. These are schools that we used, and they freely gave their time to help us write those regulations. But those are the type of people you would go to really get professional advice.
Right.
And that's the reason why the advisory committee is so important, so you guys don't have to do that. I mean, it's not your area of expertise. But the landscapers on that committee could work with the Cormac Colliers of the world and everyone else to come to a general consensus and a good one. That's the important part of it. As far as I'm just trying to educate myself here.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that Jeff or any of Jeff's guys could come onto my golf course and inspect at any time. I was fine with that. That's not the case, I understand.
It's
Private property.
Yeah, I don't care.
I think
Come on to it. I don't care.
I understand that.
So
but
if you, and I do understand that there might be some issues there, and I, for one, maybe not everyone agrees with me, but I think that you should be allowed to do that. So hopefully you can find a way to access that.
yeah.
Okay, if you have something different to say.
No, it's okay.
Okay. All right, so we have a plan and a
Absolutely.
way forward.
All right.
Director's report.
And then with that, we'll just move on to some of the director's report, where I wanted to bring up that yesterday the Board of Selectmen voted to remove the Nantucket area from the sewer district. So the ramifications on that on our end is the considerations of the administrative consent order requests. So what I was going to recommend for us here is just general discussion for this. Thank you, gentlemen. Much appreciated. We should probably wait until after town meeting to make any votes as to should we include Nantucket in the ACO right now or remove the ACO from Nantucket until we know for sure where all the sewer is going to go. We get that information, but we do have to start thinking of the removal of the ACO in these areas that aren't going to be having sewer anytime soon.
Can we just sort of clarify, just so everybody understands what the board did last night? Our responsibility is to vote on the specific articles to be incorporated in the town warrant for this year. And the preliminary draft had one article covering Nantucket and Somerset, as they're called, and the other, they have a new name for it. I call it Monomoy, but anyway. And some other lots that go into that article. And I think the concern expressed was that there are lots of open issues in terms of financing, not in terms of the need about sewers, but in terms of financing, and questions about that, and the scope of coming to town meeting with both those seemed to be more than the board felt we should take on at one town meeting. So when we use the word removal, we agreed to not put forward an article to ask the towns for authorization to borrow money and construct the sewer for Nantucket and Somerset. That doesn't mean we're not going to do it at the next town meeting.
Absolutely.
So that as we think about how that impacts our own regulatory process, we ought to take a little bit of time, see what happens at town meeting. If we're very successful and we sort of answer all the concerns of our citizens, we might be able to come right back for Nantucket, or we might not. We don't know yet at this point. So.
Yes, the intention with that comment was to just put it on the radar, not to make any decisions right now.
Well, it's important because if we, there are still lots of, not lots, there are people who still bring up, for example, why aren't we doing these little tiny sewer packaged plants in Nantucket? How could that be? Anyway, We've all heard that before, but it hasn't gone totally away. And maybe we have to look at that again. I don't know. But maybe not. So those questions are going to have to be resolved to see if we, again, build support for the kind of sewer line that was being proposed. So,
my question is, but we know that Nantucket is off the list for April's town meeting?
for this town meeting.
Okay, so we know now that another year has passed where no decision at all has been made for Nantucket.
I'd say that's correct, yeah. I think the chances of a fall town meeting or a spring town meeting, obviously in a year we'd have that, but again, we'll see what happens. You know, I remind us all, just as you go through this, the first time the town voted to spend $45 million to upgrade the Surfside wastewater treatment facility, it had a financing recommendation of whatever it was. My recollection is got through town meeting, and it failed at the ballot. And it took another year to come back and change the financing mechanism, the recommendation, which then did get through a ballot. And we're all tussling with sort of the reality of how people are going to respond to the imposition of taxes and or betterments. And that's really the tussle here. And the questions of what happens to a person who's put in an alternative system in Nantucket and he spent $50,000 or whatever he spent, does he get credit? And how do we have a mechanism to recognize that? Some of those questions haven't been crystallized to where we have an answer yet. And I think we were concerned, Jim, taking it to town meeting without an answer. That isn't as relevant in the Monomoy and the Plus Lot area. So,
But as far as this board is concerned, that, knowing that that's at least another year out, that is going to have to weigh on some of the decisions that we make.
I understand.
When people come in here for a variance or for some looking for something concerning Nantucket, we're going to have to say to ourselves, okay, you know, we know nothing's going to in the works for at least another year.
Yep.
So that might, you know,
I
change
said
our decisions on some things that we want to do.
you're absolutely right. Now, I said last night, somewhat facetiously, but let's be realistic here. If for whatever reason Nantucket has trouble coming back, let's just say, I think it might be very appropriate for this board then to consider whether or not the same type of regulatory structure we've put in for the Nantucket Harbor Watershed District would apply for Nantucket, and maybe apply around Hummock Pond as well. Those are the three major areas at the moment. So I'm not sure that's where you're going, but that's where I said last night.
That's exactly where I'm going.
That's
So-
where we
You're right.
may be going.
Yep.
But, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Nantucket doesn't disappear as a needs area. So as far as the ACO is concerned, the main thing was to be in a needs area. So that's not going to disappear then. I think people, if they need to get into the ACO, then just because right now sewer's not coming out there, the ACO isn't going to go away.
Yeah, I think it's as important as ever in that
Right.
sense. And since it's maybe not, it may come back in a year, that year it's more important to be able to give that kind of relief. So I absolutely, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else?
So one of the good things is the venison donation program was successful. We received a little bit over 200 pounds at the food pantry, and it's some people may see that as small, but it's the way we see it is it's a good start. They're excited to do it again next year, and we're looking forward to maybe even opening it up to archery season. So it would be
I would open it up to archery.
2-month long. So it
That
would
was
be
only 2 weeks, right?
this year we did 4 weeks.
4 weeks, okay.
This year because we continued it to the primitive arms season as well.
Okay.
And so everyone seems very excited, and they were really happy, and the state was ecstatic when they came and did their inspection. They were really happy to see it. So
Good.
that was great. And then, so I wanted to do a clarification as well for an agenda item for the February meeting. Do you want me to put the policy workshop on that meeting as well, or do you want to push that back to March?
Well, in February, we have a public hearing.
Fertilizer.
There's something the planning board wants us to do.
Yes, that was actually my next part.
That may take a while.
Yes. So one of the things that I wanted to do was, so moving forward so that we can move backward after that.
Yeah.
The ZBA has asked us to provide comments for the Surfside Commons 40B application. We received that email just an hour and a half ago. So in that aspect is they're asking for an official statement on Surfside Commons from our point of view on that 40B. So one of the things that I want to do was request that we can get each of your individual comments to me by the Friday, February 12th, so that I can compile it to one document and present it in the February 18th meeting for the consensus of the board.
Is it 17th or 18th?
The meeting is on the 17th, but they're requesting our comments by the 21st.
Yeah, so, but you want to do it that way, a hodgepodge of comments,
Or it's either way, whichever way is the happiness of the board, the pleasure of the board is what I'll abide by.
So do you want to talk about this for a second?
Yeah.
I hear the ZBA, and that's fine. Our perspective as a board is from the public health point of view. And so I just would caution us not to, we're not in the neighborhood density, HDC, height issues here.
Exactly.
And if we're concerned, I'm trying to think, what would our concerns be? If they don't get sewer lines extended to the project, that there's too much septic waste going in a narrow area or something? I mean, that's kind of a concern for the Board of Health. But what else are we,
yeah, I mean,
See,
I'm not sure what the question is.
So any comments that we would be able to provide from the Board of Health's perspective would be things like if sewer isn't able to get out there, how would we work with that? Because it's only a 2-acre property, so they can't do septic system. That's just not going to happen. And then if the sewer system does go there, things like fat soil and grease going in, asking them to put in grease interceptors with operation and maintenance plans on their property so that the grease never enters the public sewer system and it becomes our problem at that point. Things like requesting certain aspects of the housing code we can increase aspects to the housing code in there. So, for example, we can ask that every dwelling has a permanent fixture with the information on the property manager and 24-hour contact information. We can request certain aspects that still fall under the health code.
just to be clear, because this is, go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say, this is very good, but I don't think we do this individually. I think that's all going to be done as a board.
We would have to do that as a board. Yes.
I don't want to do anything individually.
Yeah, I would suggest that. These sound like very technical issues.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure we would all want to comment on them. If the staff would prepare something and we could review it at the board. If we think it's appropriate, I mean. That's what I'm getting to. I'm not sure what the question is.
Right. I just also, not a caution, but just think a little bit ahead here. So if we just take your example, because I don't know all the possible examples. We require every apartment to have a sign and the property manager's name or whatever. I would assume then that we would do that with any apartment complex, 4 units and up, or whatever the number is, so that we're not, you don't want to find yourself saying this one project has 57 regulations and nobody else does. So you want to be comfortable in terms of where we're going here.
Yeah, because
we're starting. A lot of those questions should be answered by the building department, the plumbing inspector,
absolutely.
Things like that. I don't
over
think
99% of all of it is going to be through them.
Job, to start telling people how to build apartments.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to start a precedent. We would then become yet another committee on this island.
Because what you do there ought to go for 360 units in Richmond, right?
Exactly.
So this is building department stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think that affects this. I don't think this board has any right to be getting into that stuff at all. That should be handled by the plumbing department, the DPW. The DPW should be able to tell them what they can do and what they can't do as far as stuff going into the town sewer. And the plumbing department can tell them how they can plumb those buildings and what they need in the buildings. I don't think that has anything to do with this board.
In that email, are there attachments of
There's
questions?
there's one attachment that I can forward to the rest of the board, and it's a reiteration of the same words that were in the email. I read the attachment. It's just a formal on letterhead request for
Requesting
comment.
comments on the project.
I think the
That's
ZBA's...
too open. We need clarification.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's too open.
And the thing is, we don't want people to think an opinion that we give could sway that thing one way or another. I don't want to do any of that.
Well, but let's step back a second. I think at least and maybe this was more a job for the Board of Selectmen, but we signed a letter enumerating 37 concerns and have recommended that the ZBA not approve the project for lots of reasons. And I think the ZBA has a responsibility to reach out to the community and elements in the community, of which we're one. So I think they're just doing what they have to do. We don't have to do anything in response if we choose not to. I mean, this is a...
What I'll do is sometime next week, Roberto and I will meet, and maybe we'll go back and ask the planning board exactly what they want,
Yep,
more
sounds good.
specifically, because a lot of what you just mentioned should be what one does when they build an apartment.
Exactly. Well, things like grease interceptors are not part of any code. That would be just a request, for example. So it's things like that.
Right,
that
right.
they were
But think
just
about
asking.
that one, I mean, it's a residential, it doesn't...
Oh, that was
all
just an
kind of
example
stuff.
that I gave.
Well, I know. So,
This
but
could-
that's why we get nervous, so you...
This could
Exactly.
get totally out of hand.
Exactly.
Every house being built is going to come before
Right, I
us
know.
next.
Exactly. No, the only reason I use that one is because we already have that regulation in place for
Right,
restaurants.
right.
And then the housing code already requires a placard with a 24
So it's a risk
hour.
we jump on your example without knowing it's just out of the air.
Exactly. Those are just out of here. Those are just examples of things that we are allowed to
I'll talk
comment
next
on.
week, and I'll ask for clarification. 'Cause-
Sounds good.
So we have a specific, not just what do we think of this,
Exactly. That's basically the way it's written.
So,
What do we think of this?
yeah, I have thoughts all the time, but not necessarily appropriate.
Okay.
Okay,
So considering that we'll probably be putting this on the February 18th meeting, then
maybe.
should we push the workshop to March?
We could do the workshop. I may not be here in March. We'll do it in February.
Okay. I'll go ahead and put that in on February, and that should be fine. And then that's everything. One last comment. I just remembered now that I saw it. The Human Resources Department has asked that everyone on the board redo their conflict of interest forms and their acknowledgement. I do realize that I had your wrong email, so I'll get that to you tomorrow morning. And then once we get that, you can either give it to me or you can give it straight to Amanda Perry in the Human Resources Department so that we can have that on file. So far, I've received it from Dr. McNabb and Ms. Weld, but I still haven't received
Which
it.
form is this?
This
I got the
You
email.
have to take a course.
The conflict
Is
of
this the one
interest.
where we answer those 20 questions online? Or
Yes.
is it
That's
something-
online. If you get
Yes.
it wrong,
When you get it wrong, they get to redo it
Yes.
until you get it
you
right.
get it right.
And I'm sure you've already taken it from the selectmen
I'm
as
sure I
well,
have,
and
yeah.
they may already have it on the file.
Yeah, I'll have to go see the clerk or somebody.
I'm sure you've done it. It's
Yeah.
not hard to pass.
It's not hard to pass. It's more of a
It's
general
the
awareness.
fear of
test.
failure that just makes you nervous. The public humiliation.
No, well, it clicked. Yes, and you'd wonder if you got it, because some of those questions are actually kind of complicated.
Some of them are
It's
a
like a
little tricky.
driver's license. You
Yeah.
don't know.
It's
They're tricky.
Full disclosure, I got at least one wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And that's about it. There's actually, in May, there's a tick-borne disease conference in Washington. Maybe we'll talk
got the
about
email
sending
about that.
somebody. It's sponsored by the CDC.
Mhm.
2 days. So maybe,
Okay.
I'm going to study the agenda a little more, and if it looks valuable enough, maybe we can get the town to send a couple of us.
Yeah, sounds good. And along the same lines with the CDC, I recently applied for information. I recently applied for a CDC-sponsored intern for environmental health work in the summer. They approved
Great.
our internship application, so now we'll hear whether or not we got matched with an applicant by the end of next week.
So they will send us someone.
They will send us someone. That person will be responsible for securing their own housing.
Good luck.
If we can forward them some information on to make it easier for them to find somebody, that would be better. But the CDC will pay for the whole intern, the bringing that person to and from the island, and we will be able to have them for the entire summer. So we'll find out if we got matched with somebody by the end of next week.
Good. Anything else? Any other concerns of the board? If I have no objections, then the meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
What's your name?